All right. Hello, I'm Ryan Watts from RyanWattsLifeCoaching.com. I'm with Steve Lang. Steve, how are you this morning?
Yeah, very well, my brother. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's the highlight of my week.
Yeah, good to hear. So this is kind of another one of our talks. I've called this part of the channel talks. And so far it's videos of you and I discussing various topics. And so before we started recording, we were trying to put our finger on exactly what we wanted to discuss. And it's somewhere in the realm of the difference between thinking about what you want to have happen in your life and actually doing it. And so to add some context to that, I think we have these great ideas we're able to understand through yoga and life coaching intellectually, right? But when it comes time to practicing them in life, sometimes we might not be as thorough.
Absolutely. That's my experience. My experience is that I'm extraordinarily familiar with the process and the techniques and the methods and the teachings. But when I'm in the stuff, and by the stuff, I mean, when I'm feeling restricted, it's difficult for me to deploy any of the solutions that enable freedom, the freedom that I long from or that I long for.
Yeah.
And as I'm saying that, what I realize is, how do I just become comfortable with being uncomfortable? How do I allow myself to say, okay, I'm butting up against this particular obstacle. I'm starting to feel restricted. And because I'm feeling restricted, it's generating these negative emotions. How do I just pause for just 30 seconds and allow this feeling to fully actualize and give it space to pass?
The fear of something bad happening or something that we would label bad or uncomfortable is far worse than it actually happening in many cases. So for instance, if I have someone who's going to come up to me and they're approaching me with a problem, and I might be fearing that I don't have the solution for that problem, like immediately, right? I might respond to them in a way that's kind of like, that kind of pushes back. Like, what do you want? Because I have that anxiety, that fear about like, what if I don't know? What if I have to face that? When actually, if I were to embody that and be like, okay, so if you don't know, work through it with them. And so, I'm not sure what the answer is right off the top of my head. And I'm curious, why can't I just come to that conclusion all the time?
Yeah, it's a great example. And what I thought of immediately is, how do we create space to ask for more information?
Yeah.
Because generally speaking, people don't know, or I don't know. And I think what I'm looking for is to connect with somebody so that collectively we kind of move it along.
Yeah.
And it's never actually the final answer. It's an answer in a process to further the development and the personal development, which is never done.
Yeah.
But because I get so frightened that I have to have the answer, and I need the answer to be the final answer, I just completely narrow, and I can't produce anything, as opposed to just relaxing and leaning back and allowing it to reveal itself.
I had some anxiety. I had to have this really uncomfortable conversation. And, I there was, from the time that I kind of scheduled the conversation to when I had to have it, there was a lot of lead time. So I had time for the wheels to go, and I had to kind of get my mind right in a couple of different times. But the thing that I think that was most successful about the conversation was letting go of what the outcome could be. That even like while the conversation was happening, I was paying attention to where my thoughts were and kind of predicting, oh no, we're going this way. Oh no, we're going this way. And I had to keep being like, no, let it go. Let it go. Let it just let the conversation just go where it needs to go, and just be open, honest, and accepting of whatever happens. But it was in the moment, it was I had to keep letting go. It was like I don't know, it was difficult and unnatural in a way. It felt unnatural.
Yeah, that's such a powerful practice to be able to, in that moment, just let it go.
Mhm.
It's as if you're watching it come up and you didn't have to respond. You didn't have to react. You didn't have to take it personally. You didn't have to make a point. You just kind of let it go.
Mhm.
And in the letting go, it just kind of dissipated. And I think the other thing you said that's so critical and so important and extraordinarily yogic is letting go of the outcome.
Yeah.
Like, we do the work, and by the work I mean the work of personal growth and spiritual development.
Mhm.
And that work then enables our householder chores, whatever that happens to be, banker, bus driver, lawyer. But we do the work because the work needs to be done. And it happens to be that we're the people doing it. Each person has their own individual work to be done, but with no expectation of outcome.
Yeah.
And in that, there's just extraordinary freedom. But to get to that place of letting go with no expectation of outcome, I'm not sure how that happens. I mean, I know intellectually how that
Yes.
happens. And there's awesome examples of people who live that way, but I've yet to embody that reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's because, again, last time we talked about like nervous system, right? But we're kind of set up to be goal oriented. So it's like, okay, I need to do these actions so I can be comfortable, or so I can get food or shelter, or, be socially accepted, or whatever the kind of drive is. So there is this goal orientation about it. So it feels kind of against the grain to be like, okay, in this social situation, I'm going to let go of what might happen.
Yeah, so there's absolutely, what is it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And once those needs are met, which I'm guessing, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, yours are met and mine are met,
Mhm.
then it would almost be implied that everything else is playful.
Yeah.
Right? If I have a roof over my head and food in my belly, then everything else I'm doing seems to be embodied with some freedom, but that's just not the case. There's an attachment. I've got this identity attachment to whatever it is I'm doing. And it really comes down to, as I'm thinking about it now, these reoccurring patterns in our life and these attachments to our beliefs and our thinking and our mindset. And we're not doing it purposefully, but there are these programs running in the background of our mind that we're attached to.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it seems, based on that line of thought, you've got the goal of this is to kind of retake over the program, right? That's running, or install a new program. And so when you're doing that, when you're letting go, is that installing a new program?
Oh, absolutely. Because the letting go then creates the space for the download, for sure, without a doubt. So this idea of, going back and this is where, a coach can be so helpful.
Yeah.
Going back and looking first at beliefs, and then beliefs influence our thinking, and our thinking influences our mindset, and our mindset dictates our emotions.
Yeah.
And that's just almost like the first bit.
Yeah.
And once identifying those patterns, we can say, okay, those patterns no longer work for me. They're not aligned with my vision for my life. How do I uninstall them?
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of techniques that can be done to uninstall them, but they don't want to go.
Yes. Yeah. It's because I think it's because they're like, to build on what we talked about last time, is like, because they kind of arise from our nervous system and the way we're kind of designed for survival. But it's kind of like the next iteration is going to require us to have more control over that. And so these practices, yoga, and I think life coaching for me falls in that too, because when you're thinking about this stuff by yourself, you're like, oh, I'm just going to let go getting this job. Right. And a lot of times when we let go of things, it creates the space for them to actually come into our lives, which is a strange paradox I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet. But when that happens, it seems to me what we're actually doing there, and this just occurred to me listening to you talk, is installing that new program. And it feels against the grain, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And a couple of things you said, number one is environment is stronger than willpower.
Yeah.
So particularly in today's economy where there are so many solopreneurs, myself, yourself, we're working at home, and everything that's happening is dependent on us. Now, to personalize it, my view becomes very narrow.
Yeah.
Right. And so the environment, while I'm living in a really beautiful environment, I'm isolated. So it's really important to try to plug into networks of like-minded people so that there's this elevation. And I just think that was really, really challenged during the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah. So you're kind of pointing to this idea of intentionality. So there has to be, in realizing your kind of context and the people that you're around who are really kind of mirrors to ourselves, right? They really influence our identity. Making sure that you're intentional about who you're being around will do a lot to determine your actions.
Yeah, 100%. That horrific old cliche that you're known by the company you keep.
Yeah.
Or if you want to project your future, look at your 5 closest friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And I think that's applicable to kind of what we talked about with, we set the title of this talk, if you will, as, the space between having an idea of understanding like a practice like yoga or life coaching and then actually doing it. And so this intentionality seems to point towards, when you've got an idea, there's got to be another mechanism in there that, you intentionally plug yourself into the experience. And the idea of saying, oh, I like to do yoga and actually doing it are two different things. That seems very basic, but I'm talking about the experience of that. And,
it must be, whatever it is experiential. And I always use this analogy when I'm teaching. So let's say, for instance, you go on your most idealized vacation. Just pick a spot anywhere on the planet and you go to that place. And you have this extraordinary experience, this transformative, reaffirming, celebratory experience. You just cannot get over how good you feel. And then you come home and you get back to work as usual, and that feeling dissipates.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It all happens inside.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to the Himalayas and I'm in the Himalayas for a month and I believe I've become spiritually awakened and I've had this extraordinary experience that's beyond words, and then I come home, the lesson is it all resided in me.
Yeah.
I may have had to go to the Himalayas to trigger the experience, but it resided in me. So now it's up to me to reactualize that experience. So you're absolutely right. You can't talk about yoga, you have to practice yoga.
Yeah.
Right. I guess in the same way you can't talk about doing a marathon, you have to train for a marathon. But I'm guessing to go from a couch to 9 miles?
26.2.
26.2 miles. It's like, how do you become comfortable with being uncomfortable at mile 3, saying, oh, this will never happen?
You, in the last bit there, you just gave the answer to our question, right?
Oh, great.
How, and I think we'll leave it here because our time that we set for ourselves is up. But in the words of Steve Lang, how do you become comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Yeah.
A question that our experience can only answer. So
that's right.
Thanks for talking today, Steve. And until next week,
Absolutely, man. I love you. Thank you so much.
I'll be back.